Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey everybody, welcome to the FigureItOutcast for December 2021. I'm just going to be honest, like everybody else, I cannot believe that 2021's over. I'm still like mentally preparing for the beginning of 1996. I mean, it's been a while. Like, time is just flying as you get older, man. But anyway, I am joined by, as always, unfortunately, the evil Rob Thanos. And fortunately, back with us now, we've got Abdullah, who has returned. Welcome back, guys.
Hello.
Yes, Abdullah, we missed you.
Well, I missed you guys too. I missed being in the podcast, and it's nice to be here as usual.
Absolutely.
And it's nice to keep Rob.
Yeah, I won't be here.
Debatable.
Ironically, spoilers, I actually won't be here for the full podcast because Adam gave me a homework assignment, which I did not get the chance to do. So
yeah,
during Keith's section, I will not be here. But
what kind of teacher gets a homework assignment and then is rewarded for not doing it? That's all I'm saying.
That's the luxury of being a teacher, is you don't have to do homework.
You don't have to do that. Yeah, apparently. But yeah, when Keith joins us at the end, Rob will not be there just because he failed miserably at his goal, but that's okay.
My goal of having free time.
Yeah, well, the goal of doing your homework, but that's fine. That's fine. But anyway, so I guess we'll just go ahead and get on with it. So Abdullah, you got to pick a subject as always. For those who don't know, if this is your first time here, this is a Patreon-backed podcast, so it comes out very early for Patreon backers, and then it goes live on my main channel near the end of the month. So if you want to get this early, or any of my videos early, they all come out early, you can sign up at any time on Patreon. The link is in the description. You also get, you can get a shout-out, which we're going to have people doing that later, and then you can even pick a subject, or potentially, much like Abdullah, you can actually be on this podcast. That is possible. But with that said, Abdullah, do you want to introduce your subject, or would you like me to do it?
I'd like you to do it. That'll be better, so that I can get on with explaining if it was not clear or something.
If you screwed it up.
If I screwed it up. I believe I just literally copy-pasted it, but all right.
That's the polite way of saying it.
Okay. So you specifically said, what is your biggest regret in your collecting journey, and why?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's...
Did I screw it up?
It's very clear. I think so.
You think I screwed it up?
I think so.
All right, well then proceed. Tell me how I screwed it up.
Well, I don't know why. Just felt like I wanted to make maybe for you to feel what Rob feels.
Pain.
Well, yeah. I mean, sorry guys, it's just 4:30 in the morning here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So you want me to feel fatigued? Don't worry, I got that one. But anyway, go ahead.
All right, so I think it's pretty clear. Any regret that you had, like anything, in terms of maybe you missed out on something you wish you did at that point, something you wish you didn't get into, whatever it is.
So I guess I'll kind of jump on that one. So I think that all of us who collect a lot of stuff, particularly if it's like video games in this context, there's inevitably games or consoles that you like, oh, I had a chance at that, and I thought it was too expensive, and I didn't do it. And then later it was like, oh, wow, I really wish I had done it when it was possible. Like, for example, I remember one time seeing Sculptor's Cut for the N64, which is now like one of the most expensive games on the system. Seeing it for like $100 and thinking that's hilarious. Like, yeah, like anybody would pay that. Now it's like $1,000 game. Or, I remember passing on a couple of games here or there because, maybe they didn't have the manual or something like that, even though the price was really good. I think as recently as a couple of years ago, I found a copy of God Hand for the PlayStation 2 for like $50, but it didn't have the manual, so I passed on it. Now it's like, oh, I wish I'd done that because it's like a $250 game. But, there's going to be a lot of little minor stories like that, but for every single one of those where I've slightly screwed up on it, I mean, to keep it completely real and to not be humble at all about this, I have really kicked ass at some of my collection pickups over the years. I mean, I don't know if you guys realize this, like Playload, the show I do at the end of the month, every month, showing all my pickups, we're about to hit the 10-year anniversary of that. Think about that. So I've been doing that once a month, every month for almost 10 years. So you guys can.
It's a good thing I sent you a special gift for your 10th anniversary of Playload this month.
Yeah. Well, do you want me to hang? This I only kind of found out what he was talking about, like literally right before we started recording. He's like, "I sent you something, but you're not allowed to talk about it or know anything about it." I'm like, okay, so I guess it's something that I'll have on the show, but I guess we'll talk about that when that time comes. But yeah, do you want me to wait until the 10th anniversary, or is this supposed to be for December?
Oh, it's for December. Yeah.
Okay, all right, then it'll be birthday / Christmas type of thing, because my birthday's, at the time we're recording this, my birthday's actually tomorrow. Actually, for Abdullah, It is my birthday for you right now. So.
Oh yeah, so happy birthday, I guess.
Thank you.
My side.
But anyway, I'm not trying to talk about myself here. That's not the point of this. But all I'm trying to say is, for every time, personally, where I've like messed up and regretted picking something up, or not picking something up, I should say, I know I've also gotten away with getting a lot of great things over the years, and so I don't really have any major regrets. Like I never had a chance to buy like a really rare console that later, eventually I was like, wow, I wish I hadn't passed up on that. But it's usually just a couple of random games here and there. Actually, you know what? I don't know if this counts, Rob. I don't know if you would count this, but do you remember when we were down in the museum in Frisco, Texas, and I was talking about that GDR of Propeller Arena and how I had bid on it? Like, I failed to get it despite trying to. Does that count?
Yeah, I mean, I would, but also you're taking the joy of Propeller Arena from millions of kids visiting the game museum.
Yeah, obviously all the kids go in there looking to see a GDR of Propeller Arena. I know that. I knew that when I said it. So, but I was fine with it because that's okay to be evil. That's fine. Yeah. 'Tis the season to be selfish. No. In all seriousness, though, that's the closest thing I really have to any sort of answer like that, is just those individual random games where you go, man, I regret not picking that up. And occasionally, you'll come back around and you'll win one. Like a very recent example. So PS3 stuff is starting to get hot right now. Yes. Because we're actually at the point where the PS3 is 15 years old. And so it always comes in waves of about 20 years. So it's just beginning for the PS3, although the pandemic admittedly is kind of pushing it up a little bit faster. But there was times, there's a game on the PS3 called Folklore. It's like a
great game,
PS3 exclusive, I think, big game that wasn't really my cup of tea, but I kind of wanted it just because of that, because it's a PS3 exclusive that likely will never get re-released. And I kept passing on it for years. It was $10. I was like, I'll wait till it's $5. You know what I'm like getting, I'm bothering myself over that. Now it's like an $80 to $100 game. And I was like, wow, that sucks. Hopefully I can find it for even half that. And then I lucked out. I ended up finding it up in Vancouver, Canada for like $40 Canadian, which is like 32, 36, something like that US. So like I didn't ultimately win, but I also didn't really lose. But that's kind of like a little bit of a minor redemption. I really wish I had some crazy story for you about like, man, I had the opportunity to buy the Nintendo PlayStation prototype, but I thought it was nothing and it walked away. Like, I never had that. But, Rob, you work in a video game store. Surely you've encountered something.
Yeah, I mean, actually, ironically, about Folklore, I remember a year and a half ago, like, even then, like, Folklore was like a $15 game. I remember selling that there. Luckily, actually, I've had my copy for like 15 years. The game came out, I think, in 2006, I think, 2007.
It was very early. It was a very early
it was an early game.
It uses that Spider-Man font.
Yeah, I used the Spider-Man font. There's definitely regrets. Like, I get people every day coming in, so like, man, like, I had this game and I sold it when I was a kid because I was a freaking idiot, and I wanted to buy, I don't know, like, Just Dance 2016, for the Wii, and I sold my copy of Earthbound or GameStop or something. I don't know. There's always that.
I have a story about that, but I'll let you finish.
But, I mean, that's what fuels the game market. I mean, you've always said it's like, people want to recapture their childhood, and replay the games that they got rid of or played the games that they never got the chance to, play. So, like, that's it. But what I would say personally are my bigger regrets are, one, when I first started collecting retro games, I jumped on I really got a lot of inspiration or desire to collect certain games from YouTube or
my bad, sorry.
Yeah, like you or like, I don't know, like Metal Jesus or I don't know who I was watching like back 10 years ago, but I remember like jumping on a lot of bandwagons. It's like, oh, like you got to get all these crazy games for the Super Nintendo, or get all of these like PS2 games, like these PS2 hidden gems or whatever. And then like I get them, and I would buy a lot. I would spend a lot of money on these games, and I would like play them, and I'm like, oh, I don't really like this, or this game's really not for me, or damn, why did I spend this money on this game when there's like other games that when there's other
Franklin games out there.
There's more Franklin games to play. So I actually, I got rid of so much stuff, maybe in the past, 2 years, really. Like, purging a lot of excess in my collection. Just because it's like, and not necessarily, just pocketing the money, but really reinvesting it in stuff that I would like. Would I rather have all of these random PS2 RPGs that I'm never going to play because I don't really care for RPGs, or would I rather sell all those and get, I don't know, Lords of Thunder on the Sega CD, a cool shoot 'em up that I'm going to dig the living hell out of? It's like, yeah, I'd rather do that. So that's kind of one of my regrets is don't follow trends. Don't buy something because somebody tells you to buy it or they say it's the greatest game. It's really look into it. If you think you're going to play it, that's when you should buy it, or invest in maybe a crazy game like Snatcher or Folklore. If you're not into kind of cool fantasy action RPGs with kind of creepy overtones, don't buy Folklore if you don't want it. The other thing goes a little bit further back, and it has more to do with me getting rid of stuff. Back in I would say early to mid 2000s, I got on this really big kick of just I want to get rid of all this garbage in my room, or just I'm done with this baby shit. I'm gonna fucking be an adult and get rid of all my shit. And I threw out so much stuff, so much stuff from my collection that I was actually one of those rare kids that kept their cardboard boxes for their Game Boy and their N64 games. I didn't throw them out. I kept them, and actually kept them on my shelf back in middle school. I was almost honing my future game collecting back then. And I had all the Pokemon games complete in box. I had all the Zelda games complete in box, and just kind of sitting on my shelf. And I even had a lot of kind of rare uncommon consoles. I had a JVC XI growing up because my mom worked at JVC. I had a Sega Nomad growing up. I was the coolest kid on the school bus because everybody's playing Game Boy and I'm playing Gunstar Heroes on my Sega Nomad. Until the battery died. Yeah. But
which was on the bus ride. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I threw all of it out. I'm I don't need this. I don't need that. I don't need this clutter in my life. And I got rid of. I remember just taking an armful of cardboard boxes and just tossing them right in a contractor bag. And I fucking regret that because now I'm that kind of collector that's for a Game Boy game I want the box and the manual. And yeah, I had to rebuy a lot of this stuff because I want a kind of a completionist collection of of games. So yeah, I definitely regret throwing stuff out, and I don't know if there was a lucky garbage man that found my Sega Nomad sitting in a landfill somewhere, or rescued my boxes of Pokemon games from an incinerator. It's like, good on you. I hope you enjoyed it.
So that's horrifying to hear, but kind of interesting because I have the little story I said I had you made me think of there. So I remember this in 1997 specifically, like the N64 was out. I had it early on, and I went through this brief phase where I was getting older, I was still a kid, obviously, but at one point I wanted I wanted some new game, I think, for the N64. I don't even remember what it was. That's how little the game ultimately mattered, which is kind of the point. But I went to my mom and I was like, hey, this new game's out. Can I get this? And she was like, you're not really a kid anymore. So no, you can't just have stuff you want. You have to go earn it in some capacity. She was trying to teach me that lesson, And so I was like, well, how do I make money? Like, what do I do? Cause you're not old enough to have a job. It's not snowing. I can't really shovel snow at the moment or whatever, and she's like, what about all those other games I got you? Why don't you sell some of them? And so I did that. I went to, at the time, a Funko Land, and they had, whatever the game was that I wanted was probably like $60. I probably had like $20 in cash, and I brought a couple of games to trade in. Off the top of my head, I only remember 2 of them because it wasn't a lot. I think I only traded in like maybe 4 games. One of them was Super Mario 64, specifically, which is kind of a weird one to trade in, considering it is like literally that game. And then the other one was like the Amazing Spider-Man 3 for the Game Boy, which I hated. Somebody gave it to me like at Christmas or something one year, and it was like this game where you couldn't get past like the very beginning of the game. Like, you would run and then you'd reach a wall, and you just couldn't. I could never figure out how to get over this damn wall. And it's like, okay, so you can get like 4 seconds of gameplay out of this at that point in my life. And so I trade all this stuff in, and then I get the thing I want, and I think like, oh, I'm going to be happy. This is good. And I remember sitting there like literally the next couple of days just being like, man, I can't play Super Mario 64 anymore. Like, I don't have it. I can't play this game again. And it was like eating me up. I remember this. I was losing sleep over this. And so I eventually, just had to rectify that situation. So I think I got another copy of Super Mario 64 again that year for either like Christmas or my birthday or something like that. I did eventually get a new copy of that game. And I ended up getting back all the games that I had traded. Again, it was only like 4 games. The only exception to that, and remains true to this day, was that Game Boy game. I never got that back. And what's even a weirder little PS to all of this, so my mother passed away last year, right? And I had to go through her house and start cleaning stuff out. And I found this box that was, like a plastic tub she had just been putting stuff away in. And I'm digging through this box, and she had actually apparently taken the time to keep like every N64, Game Boy, SNES, all those things, the cardboard boxes with the manuals and everything.
Wow.
See, when I was a kid, I thought I was throwing those away. She was apparently picking up my trash and putting them into this bin and just kept them there. They're immaculate. And hilariously, one of them is that Amazing Spider-Man 3 game. I have the box, the manual, everything, but I don't have the cartridge itself. So at some point, I imagine I have to find that just to complete that little storyline. But yeah, I thought you'd appreciate the little weirdness of that story.
That Spider-Man 3 game's like, I think like a $20-$30 game now. It's actually a little bit pricey.
It's a piece of crap. It still was.
I believe it. That's cool that your mom kept that. It's like,
I didn't know, man. I didn't know she had kept all that stuff. I mean, obviously until after she passed away. I was surprised to find it. My friend and I were just cleaning out the house, and he pulled it out. He was just like, dude, there's a bunch of video game stuff here. Of course, that got my attention. Realizing it's the cardboard boxes for like every single one of my childhood games. They were still there. Like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, all that stuff. It was just there, just sitting there in immaculate condition because it's just been in, like hermetically sealed in plastic for 30 years.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
God, you should. Why didn't you do that like a pickups in your playload videos? Like, look at all this stuff.
What I got all this stuff I already owned.
Yeah, basically that I didn't even know I owned.
Yeah, because I don't really collect boxes specifically, and they're not even here. They're still at the house, like kept in that tub, at least for now. I guess I could do that. I feel like I would rather show that once I've completed that goal and got that game back, but I hate that game so much that I don't really care. You know what I mean? I still have like childhood trauma. But the reason I told you this whole story is that incident actually is what convinced me to like never get rid of games. And that's so, you were talking about, man, I got rid of all this stuff and all these people come in, they're like, I got rid of my childhood and I regret it. That never happened to me. The closest it did was the story I just told you, and I got all of it back because it was such a small amount. But like my original childhood Genesis, I know exactly where it is. It's in the other room. The first console I ever got, that Atari 2600, I've mentioned a bunch of times that my mom gave me. It's in the other room. I know exactly where it is right now. The cartridges, like I remember telling the story about how I bought that Ronald McDonald Treasureland Adventure game for the Genesis. It's in the background of almost all my videos, just on that, like that shelf there. I have all that original stuff. I never got rid of it. So I didn't have to go buy my childhood back. You can argue that I never grew up, but either way, I've got all that stuff. So I don't really have a lot of those type of regrets. What I have is the first world problem regret of like, man, I had a chance to buy God Hand cheap and I didn't. Bleh. That's the most interesting thing I have.
Yeah.
Abdullah, how about you? You've been oddly silent.
The most interesting thing, and actually it's kind of related to the fact of where I live. So, I think I mentioned this in a previous podcast, that there's lots of hidden collectors here in this region, right? And the thing is, something I regret in all of my collecting journey is that I was really dependent on importing all my games in the beginning of my collection. But had I searched through some certain places here that I don't think there's enough time to mention them, that I would have gotten probably double of what I have right now, because there were so many places locally that I could have gone to and gotten games for cheap, even sometimes things to the extent of maybe even being for free, of various games, imports and whatever. But unfortunately, I did not search those. This is something I do regret. Had I had connections with some people, or basically just searched more, I would have gone probably, as I told you, double of what I have right now, instead of being just dependent on importing and the costs of importing. Because to me here, what you consider local in your region is anything what you consider local is importing to me, whether it's from here, from the whether it's from the US, it's from the UK or Japan. Everything is importing to me, obviously, because of the region. So this is the biggest regret I have, is that I didn't dig through lots of gems that existed here. And unfortunately, there were people who did that silently and got to many of those gems and are benefiting from that financially right now. And even that's their work, so they deserve it.
So what I'm hearing is you regret being born there. I'm just kidding.
No.
I'm just kidding.
It's not about that. It's mainly the regret of not looking through things, because apparently there were so many places, but as I told you, because we don't have a proper community here for these things, that those places were hidden. So the only way you could know about it is if you know someone who's already a collector, and that by itself was a tough job at the point I started collecting like 7 years ago, or around 8 years ago, sorry.
I think we're good on this, and we should probably move forward if you guys are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
All right. Abdullah, thank you for that subject.
problem.
So our next subject here is by Patreon backer Chuck Shaw. He's the guy who runs, or he's one of the guys who runs the Missouri Game Con, and I always appreciate his support. Hell of a nice guy. But we also decided to put this subject in towards the beginning because obviously Abdullah couldn't be here last week, so we wanted to make sure he got another subject in, or last month, sorry. So we wanted to make sure he got a little more time to talk. Now, this one's going to be kind of, I can't believe that we've never been asked this. But we haven't. And like he was hanging with his buddy Chad, who also helps to run the two of them run the Missouri Game Con. And so Chad basically picked this for Chuck, who gave this to me, who says, what is our favorite gaming scenes or references in movies? And so I had to think about this one because I don't include like video game movies specifically. So like you can't, oh, the Sonic movie, the Mortal Kombat movie, whatever. It's more like, the way I interpret this is scenes in movies where characters are playing video games, either if it's relevant to the plot or just kind of as background. So, you know, like, I don't know if I would say, oh, Ready Player One, because the whole point is they're playing a damn game. Or I would really go with something where like the characters are just kind of casually doing that while something else is occurring. And so while you think on that, I wanted to mention a couple of my favorite examples / let's just say notorious examples, because if you guys have never paid much attention, I'm sure a lot of us have because we're gamers and you watch movies and whatever and you'll see it. A lot of the time, historically, when video games are in movies, the production team clearly has no real idea how video games work or how people play them. So, and that's, I've always said that actually kind of makes sense because, I've actually worked on sets, like going back more than 10 years ago, like even before I was making videos on YouTube, and to a production designer, a video game console and its controller and the TV are just like background pieces, like a lamp. They don't necessarily have to make any sense from a gaming perspective. They're just scenery. The exception to that would be if it's some sort of sponsored thing where it's like, for example, actually, did you ever see Mallrats? Kevin Smith's Mallrats?
Yeah.
If you'll notice in that, there's actually a Sega Genesis that appears a couple of different times. And according to Kevin Smith, the entire reason that they have a Sega Genesis there, because he actually was more of a Super Nintendo guy, but he said, you know, Sega offered them money to very specifically play not only their console, but to not very specifically not play the sports games by EA. And that was like, so but then he actually makes fun of it because he's like, for all that, you know, that we did with the Genesis, Sega didn't even do anything for us. They gave us the basic money, but they didn't help promote it, despite claiming, you know, Mallrats was going to be the official like Sega Genesis movie. He tells a whole story about it in the commentary. So a lot of the time, and that's an example of it being done better because at least he was using the right controller. I can think of certain movies like, did you guys ever see that cheerleading movie, Bring It On? There's a scene in there, where the characters are playing a PS1 and specifically they're playing Twisted Metal 3. And I remember that getting my attention because that's one of the worst games ever, but they're playing it with the disc lid open and no disc in the console.
They're playing the menu.
Yeah, they're playing the menu, yet the TV is showing the game. But at least they had like the right controller. Big Daddy, incidentally, also had the character playing Twisted Metal 3 for the PS1, which I think there must have been some sort of deal there. Now, the exception to this, logically so, is because Sony both makes the PlayStation and they own a film studio. Very often in a Sony-branded film, if characters are playing a video game, it's some iteration of PlayStation. I've seen the PS1, the PS2, the PS3, and PS4 appear in stuff. PSP has appeared in stuff. I think maybe a Vita did at one point, but it was kind of rare when you see Nintendo stuff show up in anything, unless it's an entire movie around that, like The Wizard, which is, you know, a completely different example. But I think some of the best examples that are amusing are ones like Surf Ninjas. You remember seeing Surf Ninjas, where like the entire plot revolves around a kid who has a Game Gear. Like, that's kind of awesome. But I'm going to throw out one of my favorite examples because it's a totally unheard of movie, and it's probably one of the most realistic depictions of how to actually play a video game in a movie. There was this movie from 2002 called Cheaters. Actually, it's got Mary Tyler Moore plays a principal, and there's a bunch of semi-famous actors from the time that were all just, you know, there's a scene together where they're all playing the Dreamcast, but they're actually playing it like you would, because a lot of the time actors don't know what to do with video games. They over-exaggerate. Like, you ever see a guy like holding the controller and he treats it like a steering wheel?
Yeah.
That's when you got a guy who doesn't know how to play a video game. You'll see them overact on the physical gestures. But so those always kind of amuse me when you see that. But I think my all-time, like, wow, I can't believe what I just saw type of example was did you ever watch the Greg the Bunny show that was on Fox starring Seth Green?
Yeah.
Okay, there's
yeah,
I loved that show. But there's an episode of that show where Greg the Bunny is talking to Seth Green about some problem they're dealing with, whatever, and Seth Green is sitting there playing a video game. Now, the reason that's bizarre is what he's playing. He's holding a Nintendo 64 controller, and the console is clearly a PS1, and he's also happens to be playing Simpsons Hit and Run, which was not on that system. So it's like they did three things all wrong at once. And the reason they chose that game is because Fox owned it, and Fox was making the show. And then I guarantee some production designer just grabbed the nearest console and the nearest controller and said, just play this, or pretend to be doing that, because that's how it's supposed to work. So those are my, like, random favorite moments of game consoles making cameos and stuff. But I'm sure there's some very egregious examples out there, especially with Sony, because they, like I said, they own a film studio and they own PlayStation, so there's probably like entire plot lines that revolve around that, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. Anyway, I'm sorry, I spoke for way too long. Rob?
So, it's funny, like, when you first, like, brought up this topic, and I was, like, trying to think of, like, the first thing that came into my mind was that, like, what? It's not even, like, a scene with a video game. It's like that, in Lost World, Jurassic Park, where Ian Malcolm's daughter is, like, he's such a troglodyte. He doesn't even have Sega.
Yeah. It's a reference. It definitely counts.
That was like the only thing I could think of for a while. Actually, since I'm a gaming historian and I have to bring something up.
That was a good one. That was a good one.
Yeah. So here's a trivia question. What is the very first video game ever shown in a movie?
Wasn't it that? Wasn't that game from Cloak and Dagger, the Atari 5200 game?
No. I actually, here's a hint. You actually saw it at the Game Museum, and I talked about it in your video.
No, that doesn't mean anything. Pong?
It's actually in 1973, Soylent Green. You know, like Soylent Green is people, like that movie.
Yep. Way to ruin the ending. God!
Yeah, there is a computer space arcade cabinet in that game. It's like in one of these people's like apartments or something like that. And if you remember, it's like it's that super like crazy looking shape, like fiberglass machine that was next to the giant Pong at the Game Museum. It was like bright yellow.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that is actually in Soylent Green. And it's like technically, and this was 1973, so it's the first video game ever seen in a movie. So that's definitely one of them. But for my answer in terms of like my favorite, I immediately default to basically the entire movie, Scott Pilgrim versus the World by Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright's my favorite director. Go see Last Night in Soho, everybody, if you haven't already. The movie's amazing. But, so Scott Pilgrim, right, is a graphic novel adaptation by Edgar Wright. Stars Michael Cera and, like, half of the MCU cast before the MCU ever, like, really got going. Like, Brie Larson's in it, Captain America. Is that Chris Evans?
Yeah, it's Chris Evans.
Yeah, it's too many Chris's. Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, Chris Pine. Yeah, Chris Evans. So yeah, he's in it. Like a bunch of people are in it.
Chris Pine is not in the MCU.
Is he yet? I feel like he's in the MCU. No. Oh no,
You're
he's
thinking
in
of his
Wonder
character
Woman.
in Wonder Woman because you loved Wonder
he's
Woman
in
84 so much.
I love Wonder Woman.
That was your favorite movie. That's the goat to this guy. Was there an NES? No, there couldn't have been an NES in Wonder Woman 84.
No.
That movie did nothing right, so it wouldn't surprise me if they were sitting there playing a PlayStation 4. Anyway,
NES.
go on.
Yeah, so
Kid
Scott
wishes
Pilgrim
for a PS4.
I wish for this thing that I could never imagine existing, and whatever. Anyway,
it would have made the movie better, but
Scott Pilgrim versus the World is the movie's like full of video game references. Notably, it's like Knives Chow comes to see Sex Bob-omb's like band practice. She's like sitting on the couch with like young Neil, who's like one of their friends, and she thinks he's in the band, and she's like, oh, so like nice to meet you. So what do you play? Like asking what instrument do you play? And he's just like a hanger-on. He's like, Zelda, Tetris. Like that's a difficult question. He's holding like a Nintendo DS Lite, which he's basically playing in like on the entire movie. There's so many video game references, like video game audio cues and stuff, and music throughout the movie. But I'm going to go. My favorite scene in the movie for video games has to be the Pac-Man scene, where Michael Cera is trying to hit on Ramona Flowers at this party, and he's trying to impress her by like telling the story of like, so you know Pac-Man, right? And so it's like, did you know that in Japan he was originally called Puck-Man, but they changed his name when they got to America, like not because you thought it was going to be like they're going to scratch out the P and make it an F or whatever, but it's like because like paku paku means to like flap one's lips or in Japanese or something, and like it's like the worst pickup line ever, and it like totally bombs. And so like that's the I would say probably my favorite like video game related scene in a movie, but. Scott Pilgrim as a whole is like so packed with video game references. So,
okay, I'm trying to think of more movies. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Abdullah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was actually gonna give a comment. Is that I'm not really that into movies, so I don't really have a specific reference. But if it were, I do have a reference. Just to answer the question, the only video game related reference I could say about any TV show, movie, sitcom, whatever, any comment I would put is that I always find it funny when they have to act like they're playing something, and it's very similar to what you said. Is that a lot of them don't even know what's going on, so it's funny to see those some of the actors. Well, they tell them just to act like they're playing, and they're just pushing on all the buttons, and you could see that as any sensible video game, any sensible person or any sensible gamer would see that the way they're mashing in the buttons just for acting purposes, and it works on non-gamers, but any gamer would actually see how silly it looks like when they're hooking up, like for example a PS1 or Super Nintendo or whatever, and they look like they're focused on the screen. And they're just mashing in buttons that don't even make sense.
It's like when in movies or TV when they're like, "Oh, I have to hack into the mainframe," and you just hear, like, just random like T capping,
and then the screen
like,
just says hacked.
It's like I'm in, guys. It's like.
Do you remember Toy Story 2? Like when that came out. There's a scene, I remember even when that movie came out in like 2001 or 2002, whatever it was, there was a scene where all the characters, like that movie opens up with them like, you think it's like Buzz Lightyear in space, it looks amazing, blah, 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 and you find out it's just the guys like playing a Super Nintendo game, but the game itself displays as the movie. It doesn't display as like a 16-bit rendition or anything. So basically, like, in that world, the Super Nintendo is pushing out Pixar movies. You know what I mean? Like, it was insane. Before we wrap this up, though, I just wanted to mention, like, a couple others that I thought of while Rob was talking, mostly. Space Jam 2. Which is, of course, a war.
You're gonna rip me for fucking
watching
Wonder Woman, but you're gonna bring up Space Jam 2.
You weren't on the podcast when Keith and I talked about that. We both like agreed it is. We literally, the subject is titled Space Jam 2 is a war crime. So we were no fans of that movie. We hated it. But have you seen the movie?
No.
Okay, don't. First of all, don't. It's terrible. But the entire premise of the movie, I am not kidding about this. The premise of the movie is when LeBron James was a kid, he played Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle on Game Boy for 10 minutes. Not even, maybe 5 minutes. And he hated it so much that it made him lose the big basketball game, and he had to throw away video games. And the rest of the movie is him just being an asshole to his son because his son likes video games. This is a real fucking thing. And so anyway, yeah, the Game Boy comes in, and I'm like, this movie is meant to cater to like nostalgia, and yet the first thing you do is show a DMG Game Boy, and LeBron James throws it in the trash. That's not the way to start it off. But that was a scene that was the video games in a movie. And I'll go out with this, because here I want to go with, even though Rob really didn't bring the obscure to the table, I was a little disappointed in you, Rob.
Obscure? I referenced Soylent Green.
No, that's good. I'll give you one. I'll give you a point. But I'm gonna do you one better. I can off the top of my head think of one time where you saw the PC Engine appear in a movie.
Ooh.
Well, it's not a movie, it's a TV show. So this little bit of explanation. All right. The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was the one we grew up on from 93-ish. That show was actually a Japanese show. Like all the Power Rangers footage was
Super Sentai, right?
Super Sentai Jurenja, yeah. There is an episode of that show where they have to, in the Power Rangers version, they just fight this like big genie guy. He's actually one of the villains in the Super Nintendo game. Where, he's just this genie dude. But if you actually watch the Japanese version of the same episode, he's actually just a genie. He's at the whim of whoever has control of him. So obviously, eventually Rita gets control of him, or the Witch Bandora, whatever her name is. She gets control of him and wishes that he fights the Power Rangers. But before that, he was actually a genie for a bunch of little kids, and every time they make a wish, he just gives them kind of whatever they want. And there's a scene where all of them are just sitting around playing PC Engine. I was like, PC Engine, I get this. So there you go, PC Engine in a sort of movie-ish Power Rangers TV show. Why not?
That it would have been really, really funny if, like, during the localization from Super Sentai to Power Rangers, that they because PC Engine in the original. Okay, let's get TurboGrafx in here.
Yeah, come on, right, get the actors in here. We got to play some TurboGrafx. That would have been an amazing thing that no one would have gotten for like 30 years.
It's like, hey, I actually understood that reference.
I understood that reference. Bringing it back to Chris Evans, right on. Which in of itself is getting that reference. Anyway, I'm sorry, Abdullah, have you got anything else to say on this? Because I feel like we were like, oh yeah, this is going to be Abdullah's extra subject, and he had one sentence.
No, it's actually fine, because I as I told you, I don't really watch lots of movies.
I guess we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you very much, Abdullah, for joining us, as always. Now, go ahead and get some sleep. And we'll see you next month. So now I'm going to do a round of shout-outs here. So every one of the following people is a Patreon backer who is at the appropriate tier in which they get a shout-out, and that would be Carolyn Moore, Jonathan Barrett, Julian Espinoza, Leaf Hansen, or Leafy Poo, Rob's former yet current archenemy, Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, and Trey Wagner. And, keep in mind, anytime if you want to join the Patreon, you can get a shout-out, as we've said before, get early access to content, pick a subject, or even be on the podcast. So once again, thank you very much to Carolyn Moore, Jonathan Barrett, Julian Espinosa, Leafy Poo, Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Trey Wagner. Thank you very much for your support. We've got our buddy Joseph Tamburino, who has returned. What's up, man?
Hey, Adam. Things are going pretty good.
Even with Rob here, it's okay?
Yes.
That was the correct answer.
We'll see. Yeah, he's just threatening you. See, we'll see if that's that. He's just trying to do that to establish dominance, Joseph. Don't let him do it. Don't let him get away with it.
Okay.
He's like, all right, I'm just gonna stay out of this shit.
Yeah. Why do you guys always do this? I don't know. But okay, so I guess we'll just get into it here. So, very reminiscent of Rob's mortal enemy, Leafy Poo. You decided to give two subjects to us, and we're gonna let Rob choose. Now, I want it to be made very clear, Joseph, that I intentionally withheld both of these subjects from Rob, so he has no idea what we're about to go into. Okay?
That's the best way to go about it. So.
Yeah, I agree. And he was all mad at me for it, but I'm like, no, this is happening. This is how this is going down. So
I hope we get to talk about the Sony Pocket Station again.
Oh, that was actually a pretty good one. Do you want to read it yourself, or would you like me to do
it? You go ahead and do it, because I don't have the exact thing I said in front of me right now.
I got you. All right, Rob, so you get to choose. Subject number 1. You good? You ready?
My body is ready.
Gross. Sony's Game Pass equivalent just leaked and is rumored to have old games via streaming as part of it. Do we think that that's going to be successful or a good user experience, or do we think it's going to fail? Option 1. Option 2, somewhat related to that, but the GTA 3 remastered just came out and it sucked. Do we think that other companies will learn from this, or will we end up seeing more cheap garbage remasters in the future?
I think we should talk about the first one. The thing, because the thing about like the garbage remasters is like there have been garbage remasters since like the 4th gen and before that even. It's nothing new. They will continue because most remasters are just a cash grab anyway.
I'm sad to say I completely agree.
Yeah.
Okay,
so there you go. We talked about your subject. That was it.
It's going to just be.
There we go. All right. Good night.
Yes,
good night, Joseph.
This is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
So, that would have been
all right. Well, thank you very much, Joseph, for joining us.
So I saw this same rumor. Like it is a leak. So it's not totally confirmed at this point, but. The crux of the leak is basically that Sony is getting ready to launch a service that would be their equivalent to Xbox Game Pass, which, for those who don't know, Xbox Game Pass is probably the best thing that Xbox has done in 20 years, maybe. It's like this amazing, basically Netflix for Xbox gaming content. Basically all their first-party titles, all of Bethesda's titles are on there. Lots of big AAA releases are put on their day of release. And it's a subscription service, like a Netflix. You don't pay for these things, but you can download them and be able to play them. You could also stream them versus with... I forget what it's called, like X something, yeah.
xCloud.
xCloud, yeah. I was going to say like X-Band, yeah. It's like something different. So, yeah, just slightly. Ironically, I think you could play an HL94 on both of them. Yes. So Sony is angling to do this, and they are going to supposedly put on there a bunch of classic titles in addition. So you're talking PS2, 3, and 4. And I think they even mentioned possibly PlayStation Portable or Vita games.
I also heard
on there
PlayStation 1, but leak, so who knows.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. If it's done right, I think this could be a slam dunk for them. Because they've basically gotten so much flack for not implementing extended backwards compatibility in the PS4 and PS5. And there's so much nostalgia and desire for these 6th and 7th gen systems, especially right now. And people want to play them, and they are willing to pay for them. And... I think that if they were to put them on there, I think it's an excellent move for them. I think they would attract a lot of people to the platform, and also in a slightly different way than Xbox. Like Xbox is more predicated on cool indie games that get cycled in and out, and their AAA games. If they do this thing, I think it's called codenamed Spartacus, their subscription service. If they do that, they will end up putting some AAA games on there, presumably PS4, PS5 games. But a tier up, I believe, would include these retro titles. Now, my biggest thing is, I think it's a slam dunk if it's done right. I do not trust Sony 1 fucking bit to do it right.
Oh no! If I trusted them to definitely do it right, this wouldn't have been a topic.
Yeah, I mean, Sony's PlayStation's, I believe, his CEO has come out.
Jim
Ryan has put his foot in his mouth, when discussing retro content, saying that, like, who would want to play this stuff when lots of people want to play this stuff. He's just so out of touch with the thing. And, like, as you've seen recently with the Nintendo Switch expansion pass for their Switch Online service for the N64, emulation for these later systems like PS2 or PS3 or even the N64 is not 100%. And I think you could see a lot of the same issues that are going on with Nintendo right now with Sony. Yeah. It's like I just don't think they have the technical wherewithal like Microsoft has to release updated versions of these games and put them on there. I just don't think they could do it.
Yeah, like for one thing, they definitely can't do backwards compatibility the way that Microsoft did with Xbox, at least for the whole catalog, because the PS4 and PS5 don't have CD lasers in their drives. So PS1 and a decent chunk of PS2 games are off the table, and the PS3 is a nightmare to program for. That makes emulation harder. And I know that, like, fans have managed it on PC, but I'm not well versed in how powerful of a PC you actually need to run any PS3 game emulated well. So I don't even know if on, like, the PS5 hardware, a PS3 game would even be doable emulation-wise. I mean, you would hope at this point that it would be, but you don't really know. It takes a lot more power to emulate something than it did to run it originally.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't it funny that the idea that Sony thought we don't need to bother with a CD laser is actually causing them real-world problems now?
Yeah, because I mean, if this comes out like the way I heard that this was going to be is it's going to combine PS Plus with PlayStation Now, and everyone thinks of PlayStation Now as streaming. Yeah, you can download games now
and man, that streaming sucks. Like,
I haven't tried it, but
it is notoriously laggy and buggy. Yeah,
but that doesn't surprise me. This has never worked. Google Stadia didn't work. OnLive didn't work.
I think part of the reason Microsoft gets away with this is simply because they basically constructed the internet. I mean, they're literally Microsoft. I mean, operating systems are theirs, Windows, of course. So it's not surprising they were capable of doing something like this, especially with the amount of money they were willing to throw at it. One thing I've mentioned many times is for Microsoft, their approach to games is very different than everybody else. Like Nintendo, that's what they do. That's their company. They make video games. Sony is a technological conglomerate, but as we all know, PlayStation division has to be profitable for Sony to work. For Microsoft, it's like a fun jobs program. They lose money hand over fist on Xbox, and they don't really care. It's just kind of something they do. They make all their money in other divisions, but they don't. That's why they're basically, and they're so financially more successful than those other two companies combined. They don't really seem to care if they lose money on stuff. So if you throw infinite money to get something to work,
you'll
it's
get
going
it
to happen.
Work.
Yeah, but in Sony's case, I don't know if they can do that, and I don't know what they're doing other than just trying to play catch up.
Yeah. The Sony of the PS1 might have been able to do it, but the Sony of now probably doesn't have the resources. Like you said, PlayStation's basically what for the most part keeps them afloat. No one thinks of Sony like TVs or CD players or stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, also think of the last time that Sony really did emulation was on the PS3, like the second iteration where they stripped out the physical, like the hardware backwards compatibility for PS2 games, and they made it emulation, and it is not as good.
It's not even
it's not as good as like the original PlayStation 3.
Yeah, and this is like one generation apart. I don't they couldn't get it right.
To be fair, every version of the PS3 plays PS1 games through emulation.
Yes.
I don't doubt from a hardware perspective
PS1...
they could do that, but they're missing the CD laser, as you pointed out. So
right, so they can't do what Microsoft did, where if you have the disc, you can play the game.
I think we all know they wouldn't. I mean, they had that opportunity last time around with the PS4. You could have, like, when Microsoft said, "Hey, we're going to start doing backwards compatibility with legacy content," we understood Sony wasn't going to be able to do PS3 content on PS4. We got that. But there was a bunch of PS2 games. People forget this. There was a minute there, and I remember this because I got a million tweets telling me I was wrong, which was hilarious, about how I kept saying Sony's never really going to do backwards compatibility. And then all of a sudden they said, yes, we sort of are. And their version of backwards compatibility was, we're going to take select PS2 titles and digitally resell them to you. And people are like, see, they're doing it. It's like, this is not the same thing.
Yeah, and those games in particular, they could have done it the way Microsoft did it. I'm pretty sure all of those, all like 15 to 20 of those PS2 games that are on PlayStation now and were on PS4, I'm pretty sure those were all DVD games. So they absolutely could have.
It's funny. Ironically, Adam, I think God Hand is one of those games.
Yeah, figures. But actually, I'm trying to remember this. So one of the games that was added, I'm pretty sure, was Star Wars Racer's Revenge. That got a re-release on PS4 physically? Did you know that? That was through limited run games.
Yeah, limited run. Yeah.
If you boot it up, it actually loads up with the PS2 boot screen.
Oh,
it's a straight up PS2 emulated port released physically for PS4.
I actually have the game, but it's sealed. I haven't played it, so I didn't know. That's cool. I have it. I actually opened it because I think GameFly was selling it for some reason. It doesn't matter. But either way, I remember that stunning me because I'm like, essentially, that's just an emulated build on a disc. So it's not like it wasn't possible. They just didn't do it. Right. And the same would apply this time around. Those same PS2 games that were DVD based would still work on the PS5, but they're clearly not going to do that because if they had any interest, they would have done it when it would have been way more relevant.
Yeah, so they're definitely not going to do that. So that could also be something that could hurt them with this Game Pass type deal because people will be like, well, your Microsoft's legacy content, you can just plop the disc in and it will work. So
provided it's supported, to be fair.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yes, if it's something that's supported. But
actually, you want to hear a funny thing about that? So I actually, because I'm one of the few people that ever really covers like OG Xbox specific stuff, when they actually announce those backwards compatibility updates, I sit down and I make whole videos. It's like, here's every physical game that they added for the OG Xbox. Because apparently nobody kept their OG Xbox stuff except me. So I'm like, here's everything they did. And people are, I go check the comments for yourself. But people are always just like, wait, you're telling me the disc I bought would have worked? Like, people don't know that. And it's just like, well, then what is the point of the program? And unfortunately, when you look at it from that perspective, as dumb as that is to us, I get why Sony's like, yeah, we don't care about this. Microsoft does it for fun and for PR. That's all I'm trying to say.
Oh, yeah, no, Microsoft totally only did it for PR. I mean, that's...
And really, that's what Sony is doing, too. This is, it sounds like we're trashing on Sony. It's like I love Sony. It's like, I love a lot of the work that they do. But this is just the latest in the long line of Sony just doing somebody else's idea, but not as good.
Yeah. The Sony is so... Sony does that like so often. I was actually surprised when the PS5 was announced that it wasn't a Switch clone, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah, I was too.
Yeah, you're right. I actually talked about this in my 1-year anniversary videos for the Xbox Series X and the PS5. And if you remember that, I said that Microsoft, the only real trend they ever set was Game Pass. The one exception to that, and I was wrong on this, was achievements. Like, they created that, like, in all fairness. But people would point out, like, they created the internet. They created online gameplay. I'm like, dude, we've had online gameplay since the fucking Intellivision, but people don't know that, so they don't include it. And even if you want to more recently, you'd have like SegaNet with the Dreamcast and the Saturn, X-Band, as you accidentally referenced earlier.
X-Band, yeah.
But
you could play online games on like the SNES and Genesis.
Exactly,
It wasn't good. It probably wasn't good, but you could have done it.
You could do it. And then even the concept of Game Pass, I was like, even that's sort of wrong. I mean, I'll give you a break on it, but I mean, Sega did that with the Sega Channel back in 94 or 93. Like, it was a while ago. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is that in addition to that, I also talked about how Sony is at a kind of an impasse where they're going to have to decide what to do, because they're basically blending old models of how to, how a video game should, system should work versus what they're going to have to do, which is eventually copy Microsoft. And if this is true, we want to, again, stress that, then A, we called it back then, but B, that time came up pretty quick. You know what I mean? Like, we only talked about this a few weeks ago in a video that I did. Yeah. So we're already there. It's just Sony repeating history. It's just like, okay, we didn't come up with a trend, but we'll copy what other people did. And I'm not dogging on them, just like, these two guys are not dogging on them either. But it is, I think the reason we're all concerned about it is Sony has a history of when it's not their original idea, they tend to kind of screw it up. Because they're just doing they're kind of just following and doing a bad impression. I like PlayStation is at its best when they're leading the way on something. Do you guys agree with me on that? Do you follow?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much. I mean, Move kind of failed when they were copying the Wii.
Yeah, but that's them copying. That's my point.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
at their worst
and
when they're
like,
copying.
I mean,
they're at their best when they're like, we're going to change
PlayStation
things.
VR is, I mean, PlayStation VR is pretty good, but I mean that's.
But it's still the worst virtual reality system on the market.
Yeah, this is true.
Like, I mean, it's nowhere near the Oculus.
Hashtag virtual boy.
Hashtag virtual boy.
Yeah, the Quest 2 for the Oculus. Yeah, I mean, especially now that that's not doesn't need to be tethered to anything. I mean, the downside is that that's owned by Facebook. But
yeah, but it's one of those things where, like as said, this is just a rumor. It's hearsay. We don't know really much about it. But the one thing that was part of the leak, which I do want to just mention. And I believe, if I'm reading this correctly, is that there's going to be different tiers in this service. There's going to be like the base tier where it's like PlayStation, like Plus, basically. That's what it's currently have. The second tier is PS4 and eventually PS5 games. And then the third and final tier is what includes game streaming, a la xCloud, and the legacy content, the PlayStation, PS2, PS3, and PSP games. So not only are they if they do this, and if they adhere to this structure where it increases each tier is different value, basically you're going to be paying out the ass to play these older games. Now with Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, it's just Xbox Game Pass. You get everything at the same tier. Day one, brand new content. You get legacy stuff, and of course you get the backwards compatibility through the discs, where you don't even need Game Pass. So they're basically hiding arguably the most in demand part of this service behind the biggest paywall.
Yeah, it'll depend on like what it costs and how it's set up. I mean, you're mostly right on how like Game Pass is. I mean, technically Microsoft does have the separate tiers. You could just get Xbox Live Gold. You could get Game Pass on PC. I think you might be able to also separately get Game Pass on console, but then Game Pass Ultimate is like an extra like $5 from Game Pass on PC, and it's everything.
But okay. But if we're talking just console, like if we take the PC out of it, Xbox Game Pass and Xbox Live Gold are two separate things. Xbox Live Gold is to play games online. But Xbox Game Pass, once you have that, and if you, let's say you have an Xbox One, or even Xbox Series S, or Series X, or PC, like if you wanted to do that, do that route, you get everything that's on that platform. And that's the issue. They're not like, well, if you spend an extra, $5 a month, you can get original Xbox games on your Xbox One. It's like, no, they're doing it. Here you go. Here's everything. And I think the second you throw extra tiers in that, that's where it becomes an issue. In the same way that if you have a subscription to Disney Plus, it's all fine and dandy, but when they put the new MCU movie on there and it's like $15 extra, people bitch about it. And it's not as successful as it would have been in the theaters or whatever. And then you have something like HBO Go, where it's like, here, HBO Max rather, and here it is. Here's everything. It's all included in the price. You don't have to pay extra. That's the difference. And I think if they do this tiered system, that will be the most egregious thing. I don't care, like, emulation is one thing, but if you're hiding the game, the backwards compatibility, which is really the crux of this conversation, and what we as retro gamers are going to want behind not just a paywall, but the biggest paywall of them all, the third and final tier of this thing, at least according to the Bloomberg article, where this is leaked in, that's going to be a big issue. And then they're going to be able to point and say, oh, look, you see, you guys didn't even want backwards compatibility. You didn't want to play these stupid old games. We were right and you were wrong. Nana boo-boo, stick your head in doo-doo.
So I want to throw out there that I think that this, again, we must stress, if this is true, that this is a culmination of a few different factors. One is the obvious one we've already been talking about, which is Game Pass and how Sony traditionally follows successful trends set by other companies. But the other two, I think that we aren't talking about. First is, this is the first time in PlayStation history where the PlayStation home console is really not performing well in Japan. Have you looked at the numbers?
Yeah,
the Xbox Series X, the Xbox Series X is not beating the PS5, but it's oddly close. Which is really, really, really weird.
Wow.
It's, I think that on average, they only sell like 1,000 PS5s more, like a month than they do the Xbox Series X. Like, it's kind of stunning that they're actually in competition. And part of the reason is not, it's a combination of multiple factors, like, the pandemics, shortages, all that sort of stuff. But Game Pass is the one thing that's kind of making everybody go, this is too good of a deal to ignore. You know what I mean?
Even
in Japan, it's starting to have some legs. Now it's not like a massive hit, but but it's partially the Xbox being more appealing for once, but also a combination of the PS5 being less appealing than it's ever been. As far as a Sony home console, probably due to its size. That's a huge factor over there.
That's true.
That is just a factor in this overall equation. But the other one that we didn't talk about at all, and this is going to get forgotten in the shuffle of history, I think, but do you guys remember earlier this year when Sony just kind of brazenly went like, we're shutting down PS3 servers and PSP servers and PS Vita servers? We're getting rid of all that. And then they're like, you have until like the end of the month to go buy all this crap because we're shutting it all down. And then they had to reverse course on that because of the unbelievable bad PR that came from that. One thing that people didn't talk about as much is everybody, out of desperation, started buying a ton of digital PS3, PSP, and PS Vita stuff while they still could.
Not just digital, physical too. But
I mean, the digital had more of an immediate impact, for at least from Sony's perspective, because that's what they were seeing direct funding from, and that's where I'm going with this. That is probably something that made them go, okay, so there's clearly a retro base out there that's dedicated to buying our old, in their eyes, crap. Why don't we, if we have to make something to follow up Game Pass, we're not giving away backwards compatibility. That's like, we've understood that for better part of like whatever it is, since 2014 or whatever, when Microsoft announced it. 2014, 2015, and Sony didn't follow suit. They've just kind of been like, we're not going to do it, but if we are going to do it, we're going to charge. Hence the thing we talked about before. But now they're probably like, dude, make an entire tier for backwards compatibility and just get these people to constantly dump money on us because they clearly care so much about playing these old games. Let's just make them have to pay for it. That to me, in, like you said, tier system, problematic. In every single way screams, this is a Jim Ryan move. Make a paywall like ceiling specifically for backwards compatibility because hey, who would want to play this? Well, apparently some people do, so charge them out the ass for it.
Yeah,
I think you combine, you combine all three of those things: Game Pass's success, Sony suddenly realizing there might be some money in retro content, and the fact that it's oddly not doing well in Japan. Combine all that, and you have a situation where this plan makes all the sense in the world on paper. And just like Rob said, in practice, if they actually do this multi-tiered system, it is doomed to failure. Because people are just not going to want to have to deal with it. The convenience, as he pointed out with HBO Max, of just knowing, hey, when I turn it on, I can just, as awful as it is, I could have watched Space Jam 2 or Wonder Woman 84 right when they came out. I could have done that. I didn't have to do the Disney Plus thing where, like, when Black Widow came out, they're like, hey, you could watch it at home. It's just going to cost you $30 extra on top of your Disney Plus subscription. People just don't want to do that. They just don't. It's like the psychology of it, of being like told, like, Xbox is like, you don't have to do any of that. Just come in and, you're already part of Game Pass. You can have you have Halo Infinite day one on Game Pass. We don't care. To be fair, I don't know if that game's going to be on there, but I'm guessing it is.
It is. I'm
see,
playing
there you
it
go.
right now. It's awesome.
There you go. There you go. They're like, that's our big franchise, like, generational game, and it's just like essentially free if you already have our service. We don't care.
And the multiplayer is entirely free.
Yeah, there you go. Like,
yeah, that's not even needing Game Pass.
Yeah, it's so ironic. Do you remember when PS4 and Xbox One were coming out, and Microsoft made this overly complicated system about how to, like, loan people games, because they're like, oh, you can't use the discs because they rewrite and then they're not usable as, like, used games, so you have to have friends in your library and they'll have, like, temporary re-rental of your games. It's like a like, it was this ridiculously complicated idea they had, and so Sony responded with a simple ad of, like, here's how you share games on PS4, and it's just one guy, I think it was Adam Boyes, just hands Shuhei Yoshida a disc, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's what you have now. You have the digital version of that in reverse. You have Microsoft saying, like, here's how you play all the games you want on Xbox. That's it. It's done. They're all right there. Whereas Sony's like, you have to have tier 1. It sounds like a Ponzi scheme. But again, and we have to be very clear about this. This
speculation.
Is a rumor. Exactly, Rob. Exactly. If this is true, we think that in this particular way, it's doomed to failure. Now, Sony has a couple of advantages over Microsoft that I can think of off the top of my head. One is they have an entire generation of history more, which means they have an entire archive to pull from that Microsoft does not have, namely the PS1. Which incidentally is also by far the easiest to emulate. Like, not even close.
Right.
Yes.
It's very easy to do now. So you have that in your favor. Secondly, let's also keep it real about this. People have vastly more nostalgia for PlayStation stuff than they do Xbox stuff. They just do, because it's been so much more successful. The PS1 sold like 100 million units. PS2 sold like 155. PS3 by the end sold like, what was it, 90, something like that. Like, whereas the original Xbox sold 22 or 24, something like that. Xbox 360 did the best at around 90, and then Xbox One didn't even come close to PS4. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's the numbers are different, and as far as global presence, I mean, there's whole countries
where the Xbox never even made an attempt, mostly in Asia, but good parts of Europe too, and especially their legacy stuff. So Sony also has the advantage of, traditionally anyway, until recently, they can cater more to the Japanese market. And on top of that, they have all the content from PSP and PS Vita. Microsoft never attempted a handheld. All I'm trying to say is you have a few different advantages there as far as amount of content and install base. If you can wield that into a Game Pass equivalency, granted, you'd have to deal with competitive pricing. Granted, you'd probably have to give some stuff away for free you don't want to give away. But if you can do that, then you can make a very successful PlayStation Game Pass competitor that might actually surpass it. That is possible. You actually have the assets for it from a game perspective. Now, internet perspective, performance perspective, that's a different discussion, as Rob talked about at the beginning. But I would lean on my strengths and not ignore them and instead embrace weakness. Like the idea that they're like, all right, that business model is terrible. Let's go with that. Backwards compatibility. Awesome. Let's never do it. That's a terrible strategy. It's like you're going out of your way to do it wrong. At least in this scenario. Let's again keep that very real. It just stuns me. But I mean, you know, what do you do? As you pointed out, Joseph, it's like, okay, even if they just suddenly got on the same side, they were like, okay, you know what? Backwards compatibility. We're all in. Every Sony-owned game, like, that they actually own the rights to completely, we're going to do exactly what Microsoft did. We're going to well, that eliminates all of the PS1 library instantly because it's not hardware compatible because you didn't put a damn the CD laser in the thing. You know, I mean, I know we're kind of spinning our wheels here, but these are the problems you've got, and if you go too far in the direction of doing it wrong still, then this is never going to take off for you. And I said this in the anniversary video, but I kind of worry about Sony because they're in this transition phase that they have not been prepared for. Like I said, Microsoft said, okay, our disadvantage is no one around the world really cares what we do except for the US and Canada, so screw it. Let's just invest entirely in digital infrastructure. And they essentially have been doing that for almost the entire duration of the Xbox's existence as a brand, just gradually building on it. Sony's just like suddenly waking up to being like, oh, wait, maybe we should do something like this. That's a pretty big head start that Microsoft has on something like that.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Like you said, I mean, Microsoft has basically been trying to get here since they started Xbox. Like I said in a previous podcast as well, the only reason that Xbox is like an actual console that Microsoft made and the hardware for instead of basically like farming that out to computer makers is because none of the computer makers would make it because they couldn't make money for the prices Microsoft needed it without the licensing fees. So Microsoft basically made a console themselves hardware-wise because they had to. If Microsoft hadn't decided to do this until, like, say, like 2 generations later, they probably would have just, like, tried to do, like, Netflix from games from the start and not have even worried about it as far as hardware goes.
And that brings us back around to the whole idea that Microsoft has been willing to lose money on the Xbox brand since its entire existence. Mm-hmm. I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but I do know off the top of my head, the original Xbox, when it was done, all said and done, Microsoft went into the red $4.4 billion. That's more than Star Wars, the Lucasfilm cost. I want that out there. That's what they lost just to have their foot in the door of video games. The 360 was successful, probably would have turned a profit. Red Rings of Death fiasco, they ended up spending like $2 billion to correct that problem. Ended up basically still losing money on the system. Xbox One, I don't know the final numbers on that. I'm assuming hardware-wise it eventually did okay. But I mean, basically, I don't have all the numbers, but I would assume if you actually crunch all that, they're still technically in the red somewhere. And they've been doing this for 20 years. You think Sony, with all the financial problems they could have had, could have possibly weathered a storm like that for 20 years?
No.
I don't think so. And so, and as Rob pointed out, like, they do Game Pass. I kind of doubt Game Pass is... I don't know how Game Pass actually makes money because of the amount of games people are intentionally not buying because of the service. You're essentially banking on people not using it as much, I would think. You're just kind of like, oh, we'll get a guaranteed subscription and just kind of hope that balances things out.
Yeah,
but
course,
then again,
if you play one game, congrats. The Game Pass, as a consumer, Game Pass just paid for itself for the month.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, more.
Exactly.
I mean, and if it's a new one, like if it's like a AAA title, like you play Halo Infinite, okay, congrats. You just paid for like 3 months of Game Pass, if not more.
Yeah. I have a hard time believing that that's actually producing a profit, and it's not just Microsoft being willing to spend themselves into a position of power.
No, it's definitely Microsoft doing the later. That Microsoft is trying to get the Xbox brand away from being thought of as a console and want to be Netflix for games, where they might still like come out with a box for it, just to, say that there's an actual Xbox. But Microsoft would love it if they could just get Game Pass onto everything and then not really have to worry about actually like manufacturing disc or like being like a full-fledged console platform.
Yeah, and Adam's been saying that for years that they're going to migrate to a Steam competitor. It's like...
Yeah.
Yep. So we all agree. It's kind of interesting, actually. I don't want to... This is like bringing up a little historical example here, but if you study your Cold War history, this was one of the strategies the United States used against the Soviet Union was they're going to try and match us, and they can't financially do it. So just outspend them no matter what it does to us, because eventually it'll break them, and we'll weather the storm. Microsoft's kind of doing that with Sony right now. They're basically saying, like, we can afford to just make this structure and give all this away, and Sony has no choice but to try and build to that when they can't afford to fail. And yet that's the part that I think is frustrating all of us, is if all these rumors are true, they're setting themselves up for a failure. Yeah. And they don't seem to see it coming.
Yeah, so like if Sony does this and it fails, unless the PS5 still manages to be successful otherwise, which, considering how hard it's been to get the consoles, it very well might not be. Like, if Sony does this and everyone is like, no, what the hell, they might just decide, whoever has been wanting a PS5 and just couldn't get one might just be like, well, screw it, I'll put my energy into getting an Xbox instead.
Yeah. I mean, I would not be surprised if this generation PS5, Xbox Series consoles kind of settles into more of that, like, 6th, 7th generation in terms of overall sales. That, like, kind of topping out around that, like, 80 million mark, as opposed to the PS4, which is like 115 million, I think. It's like something ridiculous. And the Switch, which is going to blow right past that, Yeah. So, like, just because, for the simple fact that more people are gaming on PC anyway, but also just, I think this chip shortage and supply chain issues is really going to continue to affect it, at least for the next year or so. And I just don't think there's going to be that many being produced. And then eventually they're going to have to upgrade the damn thing, or move into a different generation with PS6 just because technology's, not like, I think the last generation was really kind of like, the Switch, the Xbox One, PS4 was kind of like that last real, like, we're going to sell hundreds of millions of these things, and I think it'll settle down anyway. Like, it will not be, I don't think PS5 is going to outsell PS4. I'd be shocked if it does.
Yeah.
So in a sense, the Switch is the last unicorn.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. That might not be true. Whatever Nintendo does for their 9th generation console might be the last unicorn.
To be fair,
Nintendo is Nintendo, and Nintendo just
but Nintendo also has to deal with chip shortages.
But
they too will have to deal with hardware realities.
But if their hardware reality they make themselves, in that they are not using up to date, the latest and greatest in screens or chips or anything, or manufacturing materials.
Well, so you're right about that, yeah.
So it's like if they were to release, let's say everybody was right and we were all wrong, that they did a Switch Pro, which is like could be construed as their ninth gen console, like and it was it was better than the Switch in every aspect, and it did 4K gaming. I would still believe that they would have the means to procure the parts, just because I think the parts aren't as in demand as the parts would be on a PS5 or an Xbox Series X.
Anyway, so I guess that'll do it for this. Thank you very much for joining us, Joseph.
Thank you for having me.
As always, of course, and look forward to hopefully having you back next month.
Yep, you should.
And we are back. This time, well, I should say we. It's just me this time, plus Keith. Keith, what's up, man?
Hey, how you doing? Good to be back, everybody, and happy to help you out, Adam, so you're not too lonely.
I appreciate it. Rob sucks. He left. So the reason he left, everybody, and this has to be clear, is that Rob sucks. No, it's because well, Keith, as always, you get to pick a subject, and we were just kind of chit chatting about what we thought would be good, and you wanted to. Eventually, we got around to wanting to talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife. So that's what we're going to do. Yeah. I'd also like to give a shout out here to Connor Wright, because as always, he could have picked a subject, but he doesn't respond to my messages. So we're going to also say that somehow you are tied to wanting to. I knew in my, like, I sensed the spirit, because Ghostbusters, that he wanted us to talk about Ghostbusters as well. So I think that all connects. What do you think?
Absolutely, it totally makes sense to me. It's a certain energy you can feel. It flows through the internet into you, and I believe it points towards Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you, Connor, for this, and you too, Keith. Okay, so all right, would you like to kick it off? You saw the movie, obviously.
Absolutely.
And I think what we should say here as a full disclaimer is I'm sure that we're not going to be able to help ourselves, but just kind of jump into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, you should probably, and you should probably go see it before listening to this. But
I'm going to spoil the shit out of this motherfucker. Let's do this.
Probably. So feel free.
Yeah,
what did you think? What was the first impressions? Go for it.
My first impressions are plain and simple. If you want to put it like this, if you've ever seen that meme where it's Leonardo DiCaprio holding a drink and looking up at the screen, that's most people during the entire movie, as far as I was concerned. If you were a Ghostbusters fan at all, you are constantly looking at it so many times, just like, oh, reference, oh, I'll tell you one thing, my lady was definitely getting a little bored of my references. I had to let her know about all of them. So definitely, if it's a reference party all the way around, a nostalgia fest, and honestly a love letter to what a lot of us really, really care about when it comes to this particular like comedy, horror, like movie epic, you want to call it.
So, are you ready? I'm just gonna go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just let it roll, man. I know you like it.
Yeah. So obviously, like a lot of us, I think that the first Ghostbusters film is a great movie. I actually remember the first time I saw Ghostbusters, I didn't really like it, and the reason I didn't like it is I was younger and I was under the impression that it was a funnier movie than it actually is. Now, of course, I was also a child, but as I got older, I learned to appreciate it more as an actual film. And then you recognize that part of what makes that movie so good is that Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis in particular were, I'm not going to say that that's like their religion is ghosts or anything, but like they fervently, in the case of, Harold Ramis, he's now deceased, of course, believed, and Dan Aykroyd still believes, that ghosts are a real thing. And they come from that subject. They come at that subject with a certain knowledge, if you want to call it that. There's definitely a passion for sure. And so they essentially tried to craft a story about that. And then when they had that information and they tried to craft that story, it wasn't necessarily intended to be a comedy, but they were like, well, certainly that's what we're known for, and we'll bring in Bill Murray and let him have fun with it, and we'll have a good movie all around from a bunch of different angles that is certainly funny, but isn't necessarily intended to be a comedy in the you're just constantly dying laughing perspective. It's just, a well-crafted movie that has a lot of funny moments. I mean, the film is shot straight up like a horror film. It was a response to a bunch of horror films from that era. And one of the greatest things about it is that a lot of movies that dealt with that type of subject matter prior to Ghostbusters dealt with it like ghosts are, either a force of magic or they are some sort of, religious thing or whatever. And you needed to combat that with, the equal thing. Like if there was evil magic, then there has to be good magic or whatever. Ghostbusters presents itself like, yes, we don't entirely understand why ghosts are here right now. It could be evil magic, it could be religious stuff, it could be any number of things, but it doesn't matter because you can defeat it with science, because science is a universal law, and these guys just happen to crack it, and they become these like accidental heroes. And then it's just a good lightning in a bottle type of movie that I do believe could have had a well-crafted sequel at some point, but there has been 3 different attempts to do so, not including the various shows, and nobody quite did it. Even the same team that made Ghostbusters 1 went on to try, and they made Ghostbusters 2, which is, incidentally, with the exception of Ray's shop in Ghostbusters Afterlife, with the exception of that, Ghostbusters 2 is it's almost like it never happened. It's not even it's never mentioned. Non-canon. Yeah, according to Ivan Reitman, it's still canon, and that the fact that Ray still has that shop, Dan Aykroyd's character still has the shop, which he got in Ghostbusters 2. Okay, it's still the events that are canon. It's just that almost every single event of it is completely ignored, which is kind of strange.
Exactly.
And that's fine. I like Ghostbusters 2 well enough. It clearly did a lot of things wrong. Whatever. Obviously, Ghostbusters 2016 is Ghostbusters 2016, like this infamous flop piece of crap movie, which shouldn't be controversial, but still is. It's just a shit movie. I'm sorry. I don't care what your angle is on it. It's just ultimately it was all in service of a really mediocre, bad comedy, which was so bad that they had to retcon it out of existence. I think I did a podcast when Afterlife was first announced 2 or 3 years ago, because people forget this movie was supposed to come out in the summer of 2020. That's how long it's just been sitting there done. So it was announced in 2018 or 2019 or something like that. And when they first announced it, I remember talking about wow, okay, this might be the first time ever that a major franchise had a continuity through line, then shifted it to either a reboot or a new universe of events. Because remember, Ghostbusters 2016 is not canon with the events of Ghostbusters 1 and 2. But Ghostbusters Afterlife is. This is the first time ever where a sequel came out that got rid of the reboot and went back to the original canon. I don't think I can, in any other point, think of a franchise that ever did that. Ever. That's just, I think, kind of fascinating. But now to get to the actual movie, though, how does it fare? I would say it's the best Ghostbusters sequel we ever got. But is it Ghostbusters 1? No. It certainly has elements of it that are very weird. And I would say that this is really 2 different movies that just kind of come to a head and you probably know exactly what I'm talking about, at the Walmart scene.
Oh yeah.
The second you get to the Walmart scene, the whole movie changes.
Yep.
It's the first 75% of that movie is it feels like it's Jason Reitman. It's Ivan Reitman's son directed this.
Yeah.
And it feels like the first 75% of it, he wanted to tell a slower story set in the Ghostbusters universe that admittedly I liked, because it actually wasn't funny. It's not that it was bad. It's just it really wasn't funny. And that's what I said about Ghostbusters 1. It's a horror film, a light horror film with comedic tones throughout that has its moments for sure of comedy. It's just that it's oddly remembered more as this laugh out loud, comedy, which it just has moments like that. This was like that, but not quite as strong. The comedic moments were not as good as they are in the first Ghostbusters film. But I'm kind of with it, except for certain elements that I thought were kind of bad. I wasn't a huge fan of the child, just having, children portray these characters. I didn't really like that. I thought, okay, so that's just the next angle we're going to take, or at least it's like first we had, I don't know. I really just didn't like having an all child cast as your protagonists mostly. But that's just me. But the narrative they were going for was decent enough. I like initially how they kind of handled, Spangler's character, Egon's character, and like you kind of saw like this body double of him at the beginning. It was kind of, I liked all of that. But then what they do with him narratively is like they throw him through the mud and they're like, oh, he was actually a horrible father and he stole stuff. And you had to basically destroy the integrity of this character just to get to the end scene, which I really didn't like.
He single-handedly destroyed the Ghostbusters. He came in and stole everything from the Ghostbusters, all their tech and everything. Oh my God, They went through it.
Right, and all because, and according to Dan Aykroyd's line, it's because like he believed there was something going on out in Oklahoma, and he just wanted to go take care of it. And it's like, well, then why didn't he tell them and they just go handle it? Like, this is what they're in the business of doing, is taking care of the paranormal.
According to them, business was slow at the time too, so they should have jumped at the chance.
Yeah, so you understand from a filmmaking perspective why they did it. Harold Ramis is dead, so you had to write stuff around that. You had no opportunity to do it another way, and that's when something like is the case like that. That typically probably means you're doing it wrong, or that it shouldn't be done at all. While I'm not going to sit here and say I could write a better Ghostbusters movie, I am going to say that I think there was a way to have his character be in those circumstances without being like, oh, he destroyed the Ghostbusters and his whole family hates him. Like, I think you could have pulled that one off relatively easily. So whatever, it works, but it's got elements to it that I was not really digging. Then you get to that Walmart scene, and that is, it shifts to like a totally different movie, and in some ways for the better, and in most ways for the worse.
Because the pacing 100% changes.
Oh my God! Like on a dime.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's just like action, 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 action. It's like it's just throwing it at you, and none of it feels earned. And actually, I remember in the theater, I actually facepalmed when the marshmallows started coming back to life.
Oh my God, me too! Holy shit! Yes.
I was like, no, don't do this. Yeah. You were creating your own, like, characters, your own universe of activity. Now, don't just give me nostalgia berries. Please don't do this. And it just kept going. And then it got even worse because they were like, now we have the Gozer dogs and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, oh, God, no. Like, I was actually kind of on board with the initial idea that, like, so if you watch Ghostbusters 1, right, there's the building in New York, and they're like, it was designed by this eccentric dude. But they don't go into that. I actually liked how this tied to that. I was like, that's kind of cool. Like, you get a little bit more of this dude's lore.
His name is Shandor.
Right.
Too, you know?
Yeah, that guy. I actually liked that approach, but they went way too far with it, because they're like, now he's just trying to recreate the exact same villain, which we know is not that hard to defeat.
Yeah, they kind of go right on into it, kind of casually too. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I that's like literally the Walmart scene is what to me was like, no, you fell like 5 points in this scene, because it's also a bunch of odd product placement. And what is the deal? It like does I don't know if this is just a coincidence, but all of a sudden I'm spacing on his name. Paul Rudd. Does he have a deal with Baskin Robbins or something? Because did you notice, like, so he's sitting there he's sitting there with all the Baskin Robbins stuff, which wouldn't have, I mean, yes, that's product placement. It wouldn't have been that bad, except if you remember watching Ant-Man, he literally works at a fucking Baskin Robbins.
Oh my God, yes, in the second, it's Ant-Man 2, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the first one.
Oh, first one, you're right, yeah.
Yeah, and he works at a Baskin Robbins, and it's like a through line joke in that movie about how Baskin Robbins always knows. It's like, does Paul Rudd have a deal with Baskin Robbins that I'm not aware of? That's all I'm wondering about that.
Yeah, putting out there.
Yeah, but anyway, so then you get all the Walmart product placement and blah blah blah. It's like, okay, you're starting. Oh no, marshmallow people. No. Why is the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in this? No. That doesn't make any sense. If this universe of events was real, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man would have had to have been phased out as a character because he's now mostly associated with a destroying New York City. You wouldn't keep that mascot around. You just wouldn't do it.
Even in the lore, it doesn't actually make sense why it's there. It makes no sense. Because in the very first movie, it's called upon because it comes from Ray's mind directly from Gozer. And this is before Gozer even shows up in the movie. So even in their own lore, it makes no sense for it to be here.
100%.
Yeah.
100% agree with you.
Yeah.
It that was terrible. And then it just keeps getting worse. And then you get to the point where you're like, okay, you know it's coming. You know that the Ghostbusters cameos are coming. Yeah. Now, to be fair, I actually expected that a lot earlier in the film.
Same here.
Granted, you get the Dan Aykroyd one relatively early on. You get the Annie Potts one like almost immediately. Fair.
Yeah.
The Annie Potts one was fine. It actually felt like contextually relevant. She clearly got along with Egon. They clearly had some sort of, even in the first film, she's kind of hitting on him from time to time.
Oh yeah.
You know, like there's something there. Even though Rick Moranis' character is completely dropped from this, and if you remember, Annie Potts and him were together, so I guess we know now that didn't work out. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But, you know, like, I kind of bought her role. That was fine. Dan Aykroyd's bit was in concept good when he's, like, on the phone explaining a bunch of exposition, which I didn't like the way that was set up. He basically just exposition dumps to, like, a 12-year-old girl over the phone. And you can tell parts of it are ad-libbed. And that really bothered me. And one line I could not believe. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just wondering about that. I just wanted to comment that just that whole in general, calling him in general was just a freaking, also another face slapper, because right when the police officer handed this girl the phone, he says, "All right, now, who are you gonna call?" And my God, now, I'm just saying that's another face slapper.
Yeah.
It just came to my mind. I wanted to note that.
No, I'm totally with you. I actually remember, like, groaning in the theater when I heard him say that. I was like, why? I mean, the truth is I know why, because they're trying to appeal to nostalgia. They're not trying to appeal to people who are actually, like, super into the film. They're trying to appeal to people who, like, vaguely remember watching it. That's always the target audience, and it's depressing.
Now, the first half of this film, up until the Walmart, is those little small nostalgic parts in there, actually kind of naturally in there, little small reveals here and there, but then the Walmart, then it kicks into all references, all really fast.
No,
you know?
we'll get there, but I want to comment on the Dan Aykroyd phone call scene. So, like, the scene in concept makes sense. I actually was okay with it. It was really the execution of it. First of all, Dan Aykroyd feels like he forgot how to act or something when he did that scene. It's like I've never seen Dan Aykroyd perform that poorly, and it's very weird. I mean, he even, literally, his cameo in Ghostbusters 2016 is better than that, which is weird.
His cameo in Casper is better than that, too. Same character.
His cameo in Casper is awesome. Actually, that is, who are you going to call? Someone else. That is an amazing moment. That's one of the funniest moments in that movie. No, that was great. I love that. It's kind of weird if you think about these Dan Aykroyd Ghostbusters cameos keep getting worse. But yeah, no, I'm being serious. Like, his Ghostbusters 2016, where he's, like, playing the cab driver, he actually delivered those lines with more heart and emotion and knowledge than anyone else in that movie, because that movie was terrible. But when he gets to do it and actually play Ray Stantz again, and it's like he's all of a sudden he, like, forgot how to do it. He forgot how to act, and you can tell he's just, like, improvising, and his lines don't make sense. He's just, it was like they just came up with something on the day of, and they're like, I don't know, just exposition dump on this 12-year-old girl. And so he just kind of says a bunch of stuff, and he tries to make it funny. And that's where it leads to a line that actually contradicts the movie, but I think it's very subtle. He's talking about the Ghostbusters firehouse, right? And he's like, oh, it's a Starbucks now. Well, how does the movie end? They get the Ghostbusters firehouse, which is an abandoned building.
And he just walks right in, and there's nothing there.
Yep.
Exactly. So I noted that the second I saw Winston.
Yep. So it's not a This is why you do not have actors improvise in structured comedy. You don't do it because it leads to continuity errors. And that matters in something like Ghostbusters. It's a very big key social franchise. This is not like a Judd Apatow movie where it can kind of riff like that. This is supposed to be something you care about. That's why we resurrected it, if you will. But anyway, so whatever. There's little bits like that. I also didn't like how... I mean, one thing we have to accept is Egon just became a ghost.
Yep.
He just did. Now, that's something that Ghostbusters intentionally never explains as a concept, is how does anyone even become a ghost? It's not like Casper, where they have that. I'm glad we could bring that back up, where he has that line about like you become a ghost if you have unfinished business, because the problem with giving it such a clear answer is that leads to much bigger questions, like, well, what defines unfinished business, and why does that work for one character? What are you suggesting? Every person who dies was like, yep, this was the moment I was supposed to die, I had nothing else, like tomorrow I had nothing going on. What does that even mean? So in Ghostbusters context, it's simply never addressed, and that was the smartest way to do it. So why don't we have more known ghost entities within Ghostbusters? The truth is we don't. We have Egon because we have to have him as a character. That is a bad thing. And that's why he's all of a sudden he's just like able to interact with stuff, which I'm pretty sure Ghostbusters kind of established that they couldn't do too much physical interaction. But he's just like, hey, I'll move a light around, I'll pick stuff up, and it's kind of whatever. Okay. I'm not a big fan of that, but okay, it's there. And then, of course, well, you know what? You take over for a minute. I need a sec. I need to decompress.
No problem at all. All right. We'll get off a little bit of the dumping category, and I'm going to go off a few things that I did really, really enjoy. And honestly, I know you're not a big fan of the kids in particular, but the person that they got to fill Ray's kind of role in the team, his name was Podcast, guy who has a podcast, as we're podcasting, funny enough. But yeah. Honestly, I enjoyed him. I thought it was funny, and at least, surprisingly enough, he did a better job playing Ray than Ray. Which is
okay,
true.
So I have very mixed feelings on what you just said.
No, you can have mixed feelings all you want, man. But it's one of the few things I really enjoyed. Was I enjoyed the little podcast kid. I thought it was pretty funny. It's like one of those, just like, What do you guys?
I know. I've been talking for like an hour, but I can't help but comment on this. So, like, in response to that specific point, I think if I saw this movie in a vacuum where I had like never seen other movies within the last like decade or so, I would probably agree with you. But since I am very tired of this like quirky side character who has to be like the funny guy. He's got to bring all the jokes, but he doesn't have the charisma of a Bill Murray to kind of do it a dry, sarcastic way. What is funny now is a character like that. And that character shows up in everything. Like, it shows up in the Transformers movies. He showed up in Godzilla vs. Kong. There always has to be this, like, nerd who's like, I'm weird, and I'm going to say weird stuff, and that makes me funny. Because the reason you laugh at that character, the majority of the audience laughs at that character, is they feel a sense of superiority over his geekiness. So it's hilarious to them that there's a guy who's this dorky. Not that I have a problem with being a dork. I'm literally a professional nerd. Like, my job is to be a fucking dork. I get it. But, like, I'm just tired of seeing this same staple character just thrown in like, oh, we need a dork so that there's something for the audience to laugh at. That's what the character's function. That's, to me, is not narratively interesting because it doesn't in any way challenge the script. It doesn't make the movie better. It's just there for that same crowd that's like, I want to just laugh at something simple. And that's not a slight against you in any way, shape, or form, Keith. If you liked it, I'm glad you did. And I might have liked it 10 years ago. But I'm just tired of seeing that type of character type appear over and over again. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely, I totally get that. No, me in particular, actually, I really noticed, the way they were writing the character and the way they kept physically showing him, the way he was physically looking in the screen as being Ray. So many times he's wearing those goggles for a very long time, looking like Ray. He was carrying around pretty much the same sound recording equipment Ray was using in the beginning of Ghostbusters 1. It was mainly those reasons why I liked the kid. I hate every single stupid line he said, and I actually really, really hate the fact the kid's not a great actor. But like again, I like the character because of all the takebacks, the nostalgia berries you fed me. Like I said, out of this group, I'm probably one of the biggest fans of sucking on the nostalgia berries. And
you've been very consistent about that. Yeah.
This movie's fed me plenty of good ones too. I'll tell you that much. I actually wanted to ask you this, Adam. Did you first ever get introduced to the Ghostbusters through just the movie, just watching the movie the first time?
Actually, my origin of the Ghostbusters was I associated it more with the animated show in the 90s.
That's what I was wondering, because that was much more, I mean, though it was dark, it was also very much comedic, especially with the Slimer character, more creating of the characters, and that's where a lot of the characters come from with Ghostbusters that I remember, and the funny stuff, rather than the movie.
It is actually kind of funny you bring that up, because yes, that was actually how I was introduced to it. And as a child, it was really the base concept of like firefighters that go at ghosts. It just seemed like a neat idea. And that was always there, of course, in the original film, but it actually wasn't until like maybe I was in either really late middle school or even possibly early high school that I even found out there was an actual Ghostbusters movie, much less that there was a sequel. And that's really late, by the way, because I entered high school in 2001. But I know, I'm aware. And it was just because, like, it wasn't a movie that was around ever for me. It was never in my house. We didn't own it in any format. And I think at one point I actually remember this was right around when DVDs were taking off. And I remember going in and seeing they had this like combo pack for Ghostbusters 1 and 2. And I was like, they made a movie? And I remember thinking how dumb that is in hindsight, of course. But I bought them and so I got to see them basically probably around the age of 14 at the first time. Because that's 14, 15 was the first time I ever saw Ghostbusters. And I thought, this is very different from what I know Ghostbusters to be. And that's where I think I didn't get a great impression of it initially. And then a couple years later, as I got older, I realized, like, obviously this is the superior thing. But, especially when you start to respect film more, which, again, leads us back around to this movie in particular, which I know it sounds like we're just dogpiling on it, like we just hated it. I didn't hate this. As I said, this is the best Ghostbusters sequel we ever got.
It fed me plenty of nostalgia berries. I loved them.
But I didn't want nostalgia berries. That's the thing.
Yep.
I wanted expansion on the universe that was already established and a new situation within it. Because one of the best things about Ghostbusters is because it was so vague and like how spirits are created and like all of that stuff, you could kind of expand on that and have that happen a million times over. And you happen to be this is the first time there was actually some sort of force that could resist it. And I wanted to see more of that. But we didn't really, you kind of got some of that, but then you got mostly just like, hey, remember the first film? Remember that? Remember the dogs? Remember the marshmallows? Hey, do you remember that? I was like, yes, I do. I've seen them. Please stop. Yep. References are okay as long as they are canonically logical.
Yep.
But like when they're put in solely to be a reference to something, that's when it's annoying. That's why I have such a huge problem with Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I don't personally like it narratively that they went with like Gozer and the dogs and Zool and all that sort of stuff again. I like that they brought back a reference to the first film in the guy who created the New York building also was working on something else. That actually is interesting because it's a connection to the first film. Yet it was so vague that it could have had a million different directions, and I love they were exploring it. But it was like, no, we're just going to bring back the exact same villain, which if you want us, the audience, to care, you can't bring back a villain that we know is already defeated or is easily defeated. Lest we forget, the original Ghostbusters, they beat Gozer kind of by accident. They just were like, we should have lost, but we just had these laser guns. We just shot at her and it worked. You know what I mean? Like
they actually thought by crossing the streams they were going to end up blowing up probably half of New York anyways. They were like, forget it. Might as well go out with a bang.
Pretty much. Yeah. And it just, they lucked out. I don't want to see them. We know how that goes. We've seen that movie, literally. Yeah. I don't need that. Yeah. A different villain is interesting.
Also, what's the villain's big defense for crossing the streams? Oh no, she's uncrossing the streams.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
You could have been way more creative with that. And also, they actually had the Shandor guy there. Like, his body was in the tomb. And
Talk
then he woke
about
up,
wasted
and then he was
opportunity.
gone, and yes! I was like, what? Okay, the actor didn't even do anything.
All right, so that part really...
Yeah.
Initially, I liked it. Then I realized how much I hated it. Because when Gozer came out, and she just, like, she sees him, and he's like, I built this temple to you, I'm in love with you, or whatever the hell he says. She just immediately kills him. I'm like, okay, that's awesome, because, like, this villain is so strong, she destroyed that villain, like, instantaneously. This is going to be good. She's just going to go around destroying stuff. But what does she do? Nothing. She just hangs around and just, like, sits around, and then she won't do that move again to a bunch of children.
Yeah, she's like that villain in, like, an anime who just waits around for the heroes to, like, hit them with something. Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, I really didn't like that. Like, that, those are the type of things where I'm like, you did part of this really right, and then part of it really wrong. And that, let's get into the finale here. So, eventually, go ahead.
Well, I gotta say, towards the finale, you know, one of my favorite parts in Ghostbusters 1 of all time is the Ray's answer to "Are you a god?" It was interesting that they referenced that again.
References, I'm telling you, that's what they wanted.
Oh my god! And it
remember when you saw this before? We'll say it again. Lol.
That was very badly done. Well, it was a bad setup. You can see it for miles, and Ray did not do a good job saying the line. But go ahead, go into the.
Oh, all right, so
yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to think about how I even want to say this. So we all knew the cameos were coming. Like I said, we were surprised how long they took. Mm-hmm. But at the end, you know, you get Ernie Hudson shows up. I was surprised he took so long since he's been wanting to be in Ghostbusters stuff for years. But okay, he's there. And then Bill Murray was the X Factor during production, but I think everybody has known for quite some time he was going to be in it. So yes, they show up and they're in their full Ghostbusters outfits, which canonically now creates problems because the film's own admission is that Egon stole all their shit.
Yeah, where did they get the
Yet they show
packs?
up. They get proton packs. They even get the suits. They get everything. Which, by the way, that's another issue I have. Like, so if there's that scene where he's downstairs, or the kid's downstairs, and she's going through like the Ghostbusters suits, and she gets Egon's suit, and it has a Crunch Bar in it. Do you even remember why that's there?
Because he likes nicely Crunch Bars.
There's a scene. There's a scene in Ghostbusters 1 where Bill Murray is talking to Egon is talking to Bill Murray's character, and they're just chit chatting for a second, and you know, Egon's like, I think we've proven is I now have the ability to contain a ghost and capture it indefinitely. And Bill Murray just kind of ad-libbed, like, because he was just basically saying, like, that's great, you've earned this. He had a Crunch Bar on him, and he just kind of put it in Egon's pocket.
Yep.
So the implication is that Egon kept it in his pocket for like 30 years.
Yep. They also have a Twinkie coming out of the glove box.
Yeah, like, we don't need that. You don't need these like ridiculous references that are irrelevant. Like, they're just initial on-site jokes. You don't need to repeat jokes like that, especially such obscure ones where even fans are like, wait, why does he have a Crunch Bar? Like, you don't need that. Because then it starts getting into like questionable product placement, which, to be fair, that is unfortunately a very big part of the movie because they, well, I mean, the Walmart scene, we know. But that way you can sell Twinkies that are Ghostbusters themed and all that sort of shit. But I hate all that. But okay, we get to the finale scene. The Ghostbusters show up. They do their cameo thing. I won't lie, the overload of emotions of seeing them there is pretty cool, but it's not good storytelling. It's just there to fulfill that, like, you know, that primitive desire in your brain that says, like, you want to see those again. That's what that's trying to appeal to. And it was successful, but you have to kind of see past it. And so I have very mixed feelings on what they ultimately did, which was that they have the CGI Harold Ramis show up.
I was kind of hoping.
I'm going to shut up and just let you talk about this. Go for it.
All right. I was actually hoping at first they wouldn't do this, and I actually at first thought it was really nice. They just kind of did the body double / just the ghost thing where he's just moving a couple of things, You know, I was actually I thought that was story-wise, you know, that's enough Egon for there. But you know what? I can't say that I didn't just, like, you know, turn into a little kid when I saw the one shot of all four of their heads together while they were all freaking blasting. You see Egon's head, and, you know, the nostalgia berries just flew over you. It felt so good. It was nice to feel that feeling again. But movie-wise, might not be the best call, but it was nice to see it one more time.
See,
I mean,
and that's the thing. I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
that's exactly how you're supposed to feel. And the problem I have with that is we're gonna all go through the Force Awakens syndrome again. Yeah, when Force Awakens came out, and everybody's like, "This is so great. This is what Star Wars needed to be." And then after like a year, everybody's like, "Wait a minute, that was terrible. That was just A New Hope again." And I think that's where we are with Ghostbusters Afterlife, which was. The best parts of it are ironically the parts that have nothing to do with the original Ghostbusters film. And we're going to reach a point where we're like, ugh, like, how tacky is this scene where, like, the original Ghostbusters have to show up to save the day? And I don't know, man. Like, this movie is, like, a huge mixed bag of things that, like, have great potential and in some ways are executed amazing. Like, and then other elements of it are just like, why did you do that? Like, why? Why did you include that? I don't know. I didn't hate this movie. As I said, I think it is actually the best Ghostbusters sequel we ever got. But I do not think you're going to get a great Ghostbusters movie again. Well, in general, I don't think you will. But I especially don't think you will unless you commit to not just the core filmmaking principles that made the original good, which was take this content very seriously, you know, like ghosts and all this. This isn't like Saturday morning cartoon stuff. Take it serious, treat it like a horror movie with comedic elements throughout to kind of spice it up. Enhance on the lore of that universe and build on it from there. Don't repeat jokes about big Twinkies. That's not what made Ghostbusters good. And I feel like unless you are willing to break that, you'll never make another legitimate good Ghostbusters movie. And the problem is we live in a time now where everything is sequelized and rebooted and all that sort of stuff. But for some reason, we've all just decided the movies can't be made unless they reference the crap out of the most successful film in their franchise. That's the only way.
No one's going to take that risk anymore.
I know. And it sucks because that's just leading to like garbage that's like technically the same franchise but doesn't feel like it.
No,
and
seriously, sorry. Delete Ghostbusters from history. It's not the hugest franchise in the world. It didn't influence everything. So delete Ghostbusters from history. I go up right now to a thing and say, hey man, I got this movie, I got these comedians, I got this great idea, here we go. It's called Ghostbusters. And I go through the whole scenario. No one is going to greenlight that for the budget I need and what I want to do. I guarantee.
Oh, I 100% agree. I 100% agree. You would never have gotten Ghostbusters. If Ghostbusters didn't exist and you wanted to pitch it now, yeah, there's no way. Yep. The only reason it can be made is because it's already part of a pre-established franchise. I get it, but I don't know. This is obviously a long conversation about like filmmaking in general and modern trends and all that. But sticking to the actual film, you get into the idea eventually of a CGI Egon, which is one of those things where you're either like okay with it or you're not. And it's really the idea of, is it okay to make CGI versions of deceased actors? You know, I don't know where I stand on that just yet. Like, I can see why it can be good. I can also see why it's terrible. You know, like when Peter Cushing was like digitally reanimated for Rogue One, the narrative part of me really liked that because I was like, it makes all the sense in the world that Tarkin would be there. But the actor has been dead for like 30 years. He has no say in his own performance and his likeness. And isn't that a little weird? Whereas in the same movie, actually, in Rogue One, Carrie Fisher was CGI created as a young Carrie Fisher. Now, she was still alive and had signed off on it, so that's different. But is it okay to make a CGI Harold Ramis just because his family says it is? I guess so, but it seems a little weird. But I mean, that's a different discussion. That's like potentially a morality discussion, which I'm not really prepared for here. But regardless, he is in there in the CG form. And I think the best thing they did with that is they never attempted to make him speak.
Yes.
That was probably the smartest thing they did, was not have him attempt to talk. But like I said, I have a core problem with the idea of him being a ghost in the first place, unless there's a narrative reason for that to happen. And funny enough, I think one of the versions of Ghostbusters 3 before Harold Ramis died actually featured Bill Murray's character being a ghost, because that was part of the storyline. Like, he was going to die in some weird fashion, and then he became the villain, and they had to, like, save him or capture him or something to that extent. That would have been a far more interesting movie, but of course Harold Ramis was dead, or is dead, so they couldn't do that movie. But because you had no scenes specifically of Harold Ramis, being alive, that he could set up some sort of plot line like that, it's just, you had to work around that limitation. And I don't think they really accomplished that goal. But that said, this movie didn't suck. It is done, and it has set up the potential for more stuff to occur in the future. But at the same time, if you even think about this as just narrative elements within a universe, so they have all that Ghostbusters tech, right? Egon made all of that, and no one else knows how to build that stuff. The closest you get is that scene with the girl being like, I can repair it, because the ghost of Egon is like, oh, put that there by just handing me a thing.
That's true.
But the idea that this girl could just, like, successfully, repair, this 12-year-old girl could successfully repair what is literally a portable nuclear reactor, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. Like, even in the original Ghostbusters, they knew it was not smart to explore the tech angle too much, because they go from not having anything like that to just like, Egon is smart, to the next scene he's like, yeah, I built these things. I believe he's weird enough that he could have done it, but it's probably best not to focus on that, just like it's best not to focus on the rules of how you become a ghost, because it creates too many other problems. It's kind of the same thing. Yeah. Obviously I could keep talking about this forever, and I probably shouldn't, but you talk. I've been saying way too much crap.
Yeah. I definitely get everything you're saying. I agree with a lot of it, actually. Thank goodness Harold Ramis did not speak, and they didn't try to recycle some old lines or something like that, or accidentally put in some lines from Stripes or something. Thank God. That would have been horrible.
They sort of did. They sort of did, but we'll get back to that. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, you got a point. But the point with the Egon's technology, very, very true. They did a very, very pretty good job pointing out how dangerous and how kind of dumb they were to even try it in the first place, because they were literally strapping proton accelerators to their backs and stuff like that. And I'm glad that the proton accelerators have gotten lighter, and that little children can carry them so easily now. It used to be hard for men in the 80s, but, kids can carry them now, no problem. I thought that was interesting for some reason. I thought they used to be...
I'm with you. And that's the thing is, it's clearly not a new one. It's literally the old ones that we're meant to believe they are the originals.
Yeah.
But now a 12-year-old little girl can wield it, no problem. Yeah. Again, one of many reasons I don't like the idea of the protagonists being children. And that's not... Part of why Ghostbusters appealed to kids, was things like I saw, like the animated series and all that. But it really is the idea that, hey, maybe when I'm older, I could be like this. I could be a Ghostbuster. As ridiculous as that is to an adult, a child can entertain that fantasy. But children don't typically need they actually actively do not want to see a child of the same age as them and try to aspire to be them. Like, it's not, imaginations don't work like that. I don't need to see a 12-year-old. I don't have to be 12 and see a 12-year-old playing a Ghostbuster to believe I could be a Ghostbuster. It's fine to see Bill Murray doing it. You know what I mean?
Nah, man, I could back Bill Murray up all day when I was 5 years old, as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, because you believe in the potential of you eventually reaching that goal. That's how an imagination works. Absolutely. What doesn't work is saying, this person is the same age as me. Oh, well, I failed at that goal. That's not how it works. You know what I mean? Like,
Not at all. Not at all.
Anyway, sorry. What I was going to say there when you said he doesn't speak, and I agree with you, he doesn't. There is one little bit about that. It seems like they were setting up some sort of sequel based around this, which will be, let's just say, interesting. If you guys saw the end credits scene, or maybe it's the mid credits scene, there's a bit where they used a deleted scene from the original film where Egon gave some sort of coin to Annie Potts' character and told her to like hold on to it for him or something. It was never used in the final film, but they brought it back for this, and then they shoot a sequence after that where she's like wielding that same coin, and then that leads into some sort of narrative about like, you know, they're going to open up a new franchise and all this sort of stuff, and it's like it kind of implies something about that coin might be more significant when originally it was so unimportant they deleted it. I'm just keep that in mind, like, yeah. But that was your
mid credits right there. The after the credits was right. just for fans.
So I made one comparison to The Force Awakens, and I'm gonna do it again here. We're at the same point with Ghostbusters that we were with Force Awakens. We've got the kind of soft reboot going on, and the movie itself is going to age like milk. But what it has done successfully, just like Force Awakens did, which was it actually set up the potential for a new film that actually can be solid. That is possible. It is narratively possible for them to be like, look, here's everything we accomplished, and the slate is clean. We don't have to deal with the Egon problem anymore. We have new established characters. We've got this. We got that. We can move forward from this. As dumb as some of these things were, we can do that. We've killed off the original OG villain. We're good to go. But don't do what Force Awakens did, where you make The Last Jedi. I don't want to see The Last Ghostbuster. You know what I mean? I don't want that movie to be a thing.
Oh, I feel... Man, now I'm picturing The Last Ghostbuster now. Oh, God. I'm seeing the story.
Yeah, see, you're seeing it happen. It's all of a sudden, it's like the girl's older. Because the thing is, they shot that movie in like...
Dude, it's going to be Ernie Hudson. It's going to be Ernie Hudson. It's going to be the last one. Oh, my God.
No. If they were to follow that same model, so it'd be like 2018.
Yeah.
It was when they shot, I think, Ghostbusters Afterlife, which means the girl who played the protagonist in that is like 4 years older now, which means she's much taller and bigger. So she's like perfectly castable as the protagonist of the film, probably around like 16, 17 age, whatever, assuming they start production soon, which they probably wouldn't. So she could even be like almost 20 years old by the time they film the next one. I just want that out there, by the way. But anyway, that's like the right age for them to be like, she is the last Ghostbuster, because you've already killed off Egon, which is what, remember, Han Solo dies. I mean, granted, he had no choice but to die. It had to occur. But I don't want to see a string of Ghostbusters movies where like all the OG cast just die from various ghost-related things, and then she's the only one who's the approvable Ghostbuster, and we just have to... We don't need to go down that. Please don't make that happen. But part of me is terrified that's exactly what they're going to do.
And you think all the Ghostbusters are gone, but then... in pops in the door, and out from retirement, Rick Moranis steps in, all geared up in his Ghostbuster gear for Ghostbusters 8. Oh, God.
I would actually kind of love that. To be honest,
just for Rick Moranis coming out of retirement, I know.
Yeah, actually, he would do it now. He's acting again.
Oh, he is. Oh, God bless him.
So you know what the first thing he did when he came back was?
Yeah.
It was a commercial with Ryan Reynolds. And it was literally like, it was just this random thing where he's like, I'm out of retirement. And then he's like, okay, cool. So do you need me to do anything? We're like, nope. And that's like the whole commercial.
Oh my God. No. Yeah. It was for his wireless service. He was like, you know what? Our wireless service is so good. We brought Rick Moranis out of retirement to tell you about it. He's not even going to do anything or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad it was, first of all, I mean, it's not super relevant to this movie, but you know, he's back because the reason he retired in the first place is his wife died and he wanted to raise his children. But he's like, his children grew up; they're adults. They're on their own now. So really, nothing is stopping him other than just, hey, you know, let's just go ahead and work. I was actually kind of surprised, to tell you the truth, that he wasn't in this.
Yeah.
Because they had an extra year because of the pandemic.
True.
To film something with him. If anything, the whole scene with Dan Aykroyd over the phone, reshoot that scene with Rick Moranis.
Ooh.
Yeah, that sounds a lot better, doesn't it? Yeah, that would have been a lot better.
After the credits, there is. So did you stay all the way to the very, very end of the credits? Of course.
Yes, I did. Yes.
There's a little something there, purely fan service. It is the return of Sigourney Weaver.
That was kind of like, okay. I mean, actually, I'm glad they did that, because she has a cameo at the end credits of Ghostbusters 2016. And I was like, dude, if she's in Ghostbusters 2016 but not this, that would be really weird.
Yeah, that was what kind of weird towards the end, and then her name pops up, and you're like, wait a minute, was she somewhere in the background I didn't know or something? Because for a second, 1 second there, it got me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, her scene with Bill Murray was actually one of the better parts, but it's literally just like a recreation of the opening scene of Ghostbusters.
Yeah, so surprisingly, probably some of the best acting in the whole movie, actually.
Yeah, so whatever. Anything else you want to say on Ghostbusters Afterlife?
All I gotta say is absolutely go see it. If you are interested in Ghostbusters in any way whatsoever, it's definitely worth a nice, casual, fun view. It's under 2 hours. Go ahead and have some fun, man.
Yeah, I would essentially agree. Do not go into this expecting it to be as good as Ghostbusters 1, but it is the best Ghostbusters sequel that was made. It's got massive flaws, and I'm worried about the direction they might take things based on it, but that's also predicated on what happened to Star Wars. So my concerns could be unfounded. But I'm also potentially calling it right now that if we see a movie in a few years called The Last Ghostbuster, I'm going to just lose my shit.
I got to go on. It's like, all right, it happened. Rant begin. No, it's all good. So check it out if you want to, guys. You know, it's all up to you guys to make your own decision what movies and what stuff you all like out there. But it's definitely it's worth a view.
Hell yeah. All right, well then that will do it for this episode of the podcast. Keith, I want to thank you very much for joining me on this. And Connor, obviously, for picking this subject. It was huge of you, Connor. I appreciate you. You went to the fences for us or whatever. You went to bat for us. Let's put that whatever. Sport ball. Also, a huge shout out to Joseph Tamburino for joining us earlier, as well as Abdullah, Chuck Shaw for giving us a subject, as well as our shout outs to Carolyn Moore, Jonathan Barrett, Julian Espinoza, Leafy Poo, Luis Bonilla, Loke, Michael Kelly, Trey Wagner, and of course the evil Rob Thanos for sort of joining us earlier anyway. But yeah, that'll do it. Thank you very much for watching. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, check social media stuff out in the description, and pick up, join the Patreon as always, and you can get this early as well as all the other stuff. Thank you very much for listening in this case, and have a good one. Oh, and Happy New Year, everybody. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, and all that sort of fun stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's important.